Welcome to the Fast Leader Podcast, where we uncover the leadership life hacks that help you to experience breakout performance faster and rocket to success. And now, here's your host, customer and employee engagement expert and certified emotional intelligence practitioner, Jim Rimbach.
Call Center Coach develops and unites the next generation of call center leaders. Through our e-learning and community, individuals gain knowledge and skills in the 6 core competencies that is the blueprint that develops high-performing call center leaders. Successful supervisors do not just happen. So go to callcentercoach.com to learn more about enrollment and download your copy of the Supervisor Success Path ebook now.
Okay, Fast Leader Legion, today I'm excited because we have somebody on the show today who, quite frankly, if he doesn't help you on your journey to higher levels of success, personally and professionally, you might want to just go ahead and retire now. Grew up in London and the north of England with 3 sisters, and he is the grandson of Holocaust survivors and the son of a humanist psychotherapist and an academic behavioral psychologist. At an early age, Nick could be found pulling apart gadgets to see how they work, rock climbing in the Lake District, and writing movie scripts with his friends. As a teenager, Nick decided his calling was to become a psychiatrist. So he went up to Cambridge University to study medicine. After a few years as a scientist, he was given the option to study the history and philosophy of science, which is how he became fascinated with the phenomena of scientific revolutions and our seemingly unique human capacity to lead such disruptive innovations that open up a more flourishing future for all. When a post-viral illness struck after a near-death experience when in India studying indigenous medicine, Nick decided to leave the safety and kudos of the medicine profession to forge a new career where he could bring the great passions together that he has in service of a world in challenge. He then had a brief stint in a top global ad agency, co-founded a startup, worked with big brands like Microsoft, Vodafone, Diego, Unilever, Disney, and Shell on strategic innovation projects key to their future success. All along the way, Nick had learned the hard way that innovation programs fail to deliver if senior leaders do not have the skills, mindsets, and embodied wisdom needed to transform their enterprises from the inside out. His current work in regenerative business, transformational leadership, and professional development is about reconciling these 2 conflicting traditions: wise and empathetic hearts and breakthrough minds with a bias for action. The result is BioTransformation Theory and Practice, BTTP, a product of 30 years and relentless effort to integrate the very latest brain science with the heartfelt insights from the great wisdom traditions. Nick leverages this profound yet practical methodology within the business he co-founded with his wife, Switch On Worldwide. The team runs state-of-the-art leadership and personal development programs that are delivered internally within companies like Novartis, Nike, HSBC, and Intel, and open to all within their flagship program, Master Transformational Leadership. Nick is also a co-founder of a creative sustainability consultancy, Future Makers, that harnesses BTTP to support leaders in multinational and complex systems to transform to a regenerative economy. On the endlessly challenging yet fascinating journey to unfold his purpose into a world that resists purposeful transformation, Nick has written for the FT, being featured in the Times, and has authored an academic paper with his father. He has taught on the MBA and public leadership programs for Yale, Oxford, Sciences Po, UCL, and the London School of Business, and has had his own BBC TV shows as a transformational coach. And he is the author of Now Lead the Change. However, the real journey has been about walking his own talk by transforming his own habits, outdated assumptions, and emotional wounding so that he can be authentically transformational leader with his clients, business partners, colleagues, and loved ones, and above all, his 2 fantastic young sons. Nick currently resides near Brighton in the UK with his business partner wife, Allison, and the boys. Nick Jankel, are you ready to help us get over the hump?
That was great. The boys, indeed.
Nick Jankel, are you ready to help us get over the hump?
Oh, the hump. Yeah. A hump. I can get over a hump. There's an endless supply of humps. So that's the good thing about life.
And I can tell you, oh my goodness, with going through and your book and doing some of my due diligence like I normally do, I try to prepare for, the guests that I have on this show for a multitude of reasons. It gives me an opportunity to know, what to ask, where you're coming from, some of your perspectives, and, to open up my mind so that I can take some things that can be very well complex, and make them easier so that we can take action, right? Because goodness knows, the confusion in the world is increasing at an increasing rate. And you talk about this a lot in the book. But this has so much depth. And for me, what I do in my due diligence is I go through and I review the book, and then some of them I set aside. And so I'm like, okay, that's a must, read so that I can, get greater, understanding and, really make a bigger impact in my own life and those that are within my circle, and others I'm like, hey, that was good to know. Great. And it was a good show and I learned something. And move on. Man, this is at the top of my list.
Thank you. I appreciate, first of all, I just want to say I appreciate your due diligence, because a lot of hosts don't read books and don't get involved. And it's so touching personally, but also really value making when you have read something of mine, and then I can bring that and you can bring your questions, and we can meet somewhere and co-create together in this rest of this time we have together.
Most definitely. And the thing is, you're talking about connection and creation and, looking at your work, you do it at a multitude of different levels. And your depth, so I was chatting with someone the other day. This is perspective taking, chatting with somebody the other day, and we started having a conversation, and he stops and he goes, man, you're deep. And that was it. So I'm going to say that back to you, Nick, man, you're deep. And I'm just totally fascinated and look forward to continue to collaborate with you in the future. But before we get into some of this discussion about the book and some of your work and how people can go through the transformation, can you tell us about how what you're going to share today can impact the customer experience?
So for me, the customer experience is actually where connection lives inside an organization, or it's one of the places where connection lives. So it's a gateway, if you like, into more depth, more insight, more empathy, more creativity. Because what most corporates have realized is you can't connect with customers if you use sort of technology mindset or operational mindset. They're not interested. They're not interested in widgets and tech specs and the 12,000 things your product does. They're not interested in trying to go through multiple websites to try and find what they want to know. They're interested in, can you connect with me in a way that I can get in my world, not your world, my world, and give me the stuff that I want to hear about you and your products and your services. And that's the same whether you're selling to, as I do, very senior clients, very wealthy, intelligent people, right through to a 15-year-old. And so for me, growing up in advertising, which is essentially a customer experience domain, and then going to innovation, which is the same, customer-focused strategy, essentially. Innovation is basically customer-focused strategy. It doesn't really, people call it innovation because it sounds good. This is where you get to bring empathy, insight, connectivity, listening to people into the business world. And when innovation, UX design, customer experience, when it first developed 20 years ago, this was a bold, crazy idea. And it still is in some organizations, that we actually might want to not be so clever. And instead of being clever, we're going to listen to our customers and try and anticipate their needs and understand their needs. And that for me is one of the things that we could talk about today, is that although it sounds easy to do, it's actually not as easy as it looks, because we, I believe, have two very different modes of being, and business has usually trained us to optimize one mode of being. Whereas to listen to people, employees, customers, users, consumers, we have to step out of get stuff done and execute mode, and we have to actually slow it down, not have the answer in our head, not think we're brilliant, not think we know what they're going to say, and just listen to them, and really get them. And that's surprisingly hard for senior people to do often.
Well, and for you, you've put it into this framework of ongoing iteration and understanding and development, and you refer to this as the BioTransformation Theory.
Yes.
So if you can explain that for us.
So I'll answer the two questions. So BioTransformation Theory is the overall body of work that I've put together over the years. And it's got lots of different principles and lots of different models and tools, but it's basically a theory about how you change things by changing people. To sum it all up, you want to change your company, you want to change your team, you want to change your organization, change your product. Well, that involves people changing. And so the theory is about how you do that, how you change yourself, and then so therefore change your product, service, organization. But that's different from similar. A version of that is by listening to our customers, by serving our customers, by seeking to understand, anticipate, and have insight into our customers' needs and pains that they may not even have themselves yet. We grow ourselves as leaders. And so there's a continuous dialogue between what my customer wants and who I am. Well, there should be. Sorry, I should state there should be that dialogue. And actually, you can often tell when an organization is starting to fade from relevance because it broke that dialogue, because it got so caught up in its own world and internally focused. Well, I want to get to this board position, and we've got our project planning process, we've got our budget plan. It's so caught up in its own drama, if you like, the drama of it as a PLC or an Inc., that it's no longer keeping its ear to the ground of what do you want? Because I'm here to serve you. And one of the things we often forget in leadership is if our customer can solve their problems themselves, they don't need you to solve them for them. They don't need to pay you for the privilege. And if your customers are getting more empowered and wiser and more connected and more able to trade on the stock exchange, more able to share information, more able to do innovate, whatever it is, generally speaking, our customers are getting wiser and smarter. And therefore, if they don't need your services anymore because they worked out how to solve it themselves, and you're not listening for the next pain that's coming along that they can't solve, then you slowly fade from relevance. It doesn't matter whether you're a public sector organization, whether you're a corporate, doesn't matter, a small company. If you can't solve a pain that people can't solve for themselves, you do not have a business.
Well, and as you're talking, I start thinking about the difference between people knowing how to solve it and people being able to do it rapidly. I mean, and I think that's where a lot of solutions...
And effectively, yeah, rapidly and effectively. Because, for example, let's say one of the things that we do is transformational coaching. Most people can probably coach themselves or find friends. Over a 10 years time, they probably have a breakthrough in a certain area. So what we offer is not the fact that you'll have a better breakthrough, you just have a quicker breakthrough, be more effective, less pain along the journey, less resistance, less wasted time, our most precious commodity, right? So you can pay us for that privilege. We're not saying that you can't do it yourself. Same with innovation consulting, same with a lot of these things. But that's quite a different nuance from saying you can't do, old version of consulting, you can't do this without us. Because we're the genius, you know.
And I think that distinction is vitally important for a lot of people when you're also responsible for developing those that report to you.
Absolutely.
Because, you can go through the process and help them, to kind of give them the information so that they can, hopefully, and it's hope, move to a higher level of value to the organization, to their own personal life, but that's just not the way it works. So that means that you also have to start, like with some of these programs, with yourself. Absolutely.
Yeah. Which is not, we don't like to, we much rather start with someone else. I'll solve your problems for you, but let's not go into mine.
I had one of those moments last night when my daughter was still up till 1 a.m. and I would walk
right.
She had to get up and go to school in the morning. I'm like, what are you doing? It's 1 a.m. She goes, you're up.
Absolutely. Well, actually, I have to say my parenting journey and my leadership journey are definitely interlinked. And I have become a better leader by being a parent and become a better parent by being a leader. And I actually think they have a lot of similarity. And that, what that does not mean is to say that you are the parents of your team, the people who report into you. You're not their parents. But in some ways, you're not parents to your children either. You're leaders to your children. And so there is a blurring of those lines for me. And I often bring in examples from my parenting into my leadership programs because it's so relevant. Because you can't tell your kids what to do anymore. In 2021, you can't control them in the way maybe we were controlled, or certainly our parents' generation were controlled. It's a negotiation. Your storytelling. When I do a program on storytelling, I'm saying to you, basically, if you want to change how your kids work, you've got to be really good at storytelling, or you're going to be in a world of conflict and violence.
Very much so. And so what we're talking about is transformation, their transformation, organizational transformation. And so for you, that's the very unique question that we must answer is what is needed, for successful business transformation today, right? And in the book, you essentially break that down into, these 7 elements, which is the heart, of BioTransformation Theory. And that is how your one unified mind and body really works, 2 modes of consciousness at your disposal, and how to use the right one to fit the moment. The 3rd way of creative harmony that gets you out of simplistic and oppositional dualities. The 4 elements that make up every leadership and organizational habit, and how to break through those patterns to create the change you want to see. The 5 stages of transformational development that you can inhibit as leaders, and how to consciously evolve yourself to make the most of your one short life. And the 6 spirals of transformation or action that enables you to embrace and solve any problem from the inside out, from self-transformation through self-mastery, right up to leading systematic change. And then the 7 stages of how to lead transformation in yourself, your team, your organization, and your systems by moving along the transformation curve. So what is the transformation curve?
It's kind of like it was probably the first thing I ever sort of realized I'd brought some kind of genuine contribution to the conversation of innovation and change. And it's actually, I was using an innovation tool. So my work has for a long time been split reasonably equally between doing innovation and sort of organizational change work, pretty hardcore. We want to build a new business model in whatever. And then also I love doing personal change work. And one day I was working on both of them together at the same time, but like flipping between them, doing a bit of this, a bit of this. And it suddenly, like this epiphany occurred when I realized that the journey that we were telling our clients they were going on an innovation program, 18-month, 2-year program, looked remarkably like the journey I was designing as a coaching format for individual people program. I was like, wow, what is it? And so that was about 10 years ago. And then, so for the last 10 years, I've been a student of this thing called the transformation curve. And just to help you visualize it, if you're watching in, it's a J-shaped curve. So it starts off in a place where things are okay, but you realize there's something happening. There's a problem that's emerging. It's not like a crisis probably usually yet, but there's something not working. And then it lands up somewhere better than that, somewhere higher up than that. But the trick of the transformation curve is it's not a linear process like a machine where you go get a bit better, a bit better, a bit better, a bit better. It actually gets worse first. It goes deep. You have to go down into your own inability, where you let go of the old. So in innovation talk, that is challenging assumptions, business model assumptions. We're saying, well, what happens if we didn't do gasoline cars? What? No, we're GM. We always do gasoline cars. That's what we do. So that's kind of like the journey of that. So you're questioning, you're going into chaos. You're like, well, if it's not gas, is it electric? I don't know. Is it what? Blah blah. This is what we call the edge of chaos in the dip of the J. The personal version is, oh my God, I know I don't want to act like that with my daughter anymore, but I don't know who I am without that behavior, for example. So this is the down part of the curve, and it doesn't feel good, by the way. No one ever likes that very much. And then you have this insight, epiphany at the very bottom of the J, where you're like, oh my God, I could be about this, or oh my God, my company could do this. And then you have a long journey of building that new thing into the world. So if it's a behavior pattern, you are practicing every day running or walking up the stairs over, and it might take you 2 or 3 years before you really reach the top and you're like, wow, I'm actually fit. Innovation terms, that would be testing stuff out, piloting, prototyping, developing MVP, building one small company and then expanding it. So that's the J curve. That's we call it the transformation curve. And by studying it, you learn a hell of a lot about change, essentially. And I use it as a way of describing particularly what gets in the way of transformation.
As you're talking, I start visualizing that if I have also team members and I'm thinking about their development and how that aligns with the organization or does not, that there's multiple J curves that I have to be responsible for if I'm a leader.
Absolutely.
Okay, so
you've got your own, and we're usually in one place on a J curve in every part of our life. So we might be in our relationship with our partner, in a really up period of new growth, but on our relationship with our health, we're on a down. Things aren't working, and we're sort of slipping down. And so then we've got all our team members who are on their own journeys all the time. And then we've got customers who are also on their journeys, right? And particularly if you're trying to get them to do something new, you can't assume that they can have the same breakthrough idea you've had about the product they should have. You have to take them on a journey. You have to take them through the curve you've gone on, and that's the storytelling piece, without them having to experience the curve themselves, which is quite interesting, right? Because one of the great challenges of innovation, of business change, digital transformation, is often the companies had the journey. It's like, we realized it's all about, electric cars, if you're Tesla, right? But it takes you 10 years to persuade everyone else that your genius is the genius they need in their customer moment. And most 9 out of 10 companies fail. And it's not because it wasn't a good idea. It's because they didn't know how to bring people with them on the journey. And that's why the customer experience is not just about the imminent moment right now, but it's about the narrative structure, the brand structure, the touch points that you are bringing people with and giving them a little bit of the genius of your product, service, and model overall constructed. So they're like, oh my God, I get why this is $2,000. Not, if you look at an Apple iPhone, right, compared to a Nokia phone, which is $10, Nokia phone these days, iPhone, $1,500. The reason you can sell one for whatever, 100x the other, is because the customer experience Apple has created has been so marvelously constructed and took a very long time. It's a very thing people forget. They were telling this story 40 years ago.
Well, I mean, and when I start, even then, when I start thinking about all the different generations in the workforce, in the marketplace, how do you actually make that connection across that broad swath? Because then you even start taking the different impacts and effects and engagements or lack thereof.
Yeah. So one of the things you don't want to do is pretend to be different people for different customer or employee segments. So for you guys, I'm going to pretend to be the really cool brand. For you guys, I'm going to be this older kind. That's horrible, because then people know that you're not authentic. And this is whether you're as an individual leader or a company brand. You can't change yourself for others. What you can do, though, is learn to situationally adjust how you show up to meet people where they're at. You're not different. So in a given week, I might be doing a keynote for a bunch of 60-something VPs, SVPs, and C-suite leaders in a very old company. I might be doing a deep, workshop with 20-somethings in another company, and I'll be doing something personal development stuff at the weekend with a bunch of people who aren't in the corporate world at all. I'm always the same Nick, but I am situationally bringing different parts of my flavors, my tastes, my bits, myself, to connect with my customer in a way that is authentic but empathic with what they want, not what I think they should have of me, if that makes sense.
Well, it does make sense. In addition to that, you and I, before we started recording, we started talking about, even like today, you can put these, different types of backgrounds.
Right.
So you had one, and I had done my due diligence, and I saw you in another type of setting, and I said, I think we should do that one. And you said to me something I think is somewhat profound, but also important in regards to.
Yeah.
Well, some people start books and they're like, "Oh, it's too academic." But here's the thing about research and academia: is it is based on a lot of theory, right? Mm-hmm. So a lot of the work that you're doing is it's based on a lot of theory. But the thing is the testing and then actually seeing what works and what doesn't work. That's the connection. And we need people who can take all of this research and be able to distill and put those into action plans. And that's your gift.
It is. Thank you for saying that. I've become fully able to embrace the fact that I've got one foot in theory. and not to be ashamed of it. I said to you at the beginning of this, I said, yeah, academic is a dirty term in business, right? Which is crazy. Why would we cut away as leaders all the knowledge that people who are paid just to sit and look at stuff and study stuff are developing? On the other hand, if you've ever, and I have multiple times, brought an academic into a business setting, except for a very few cases, they have no idea how to deliver the insight in a customer experience focused way, right? So they're just going blah, 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 blah. And everyone's like, oh my God, I'm on the floor of death. That has changed. Academics have definitely got better training in delivery and storytelling and speaking. But I believe it's really important if we're doing leadership in this world, which is so complex. This is the thing that I want to bring in now. We live in such a complex world that none of us can be domain experts in everything anymore. No one can. I mean, I can't understand AI and VR and millennial employment and Gen Z needs, and no one can, right? So therefore, we have to start relying on other people who are domain experts. But our job as leaders is to, if you think about the domain experts as verticals in your conversation, like a table, I don't know. The world has lots of vertical experts, and if you do a PhD, you're like micro vertical. You're like, this tiny little thing I know about, but don't ask me about the thing 10 years earlier in history. No idea. Where you're like, really, you don't know anything about 10 years after the time that you're an expert in? That's madness. But our job as leaders is to connect up all these vertical ninjas with general horizontal insights into human experience, into customer experience, into business experience, into how to get something to happen, about how to make things effective, how to trim out unnecessary steps in a process, ... And that's really the job of a leader, I think, these days, is to have maybe one or two technical expertise that you still have, We've all got something, we all trained in something. If you're the CEO, maybe you were the FD, maybe you're the COO, maybe, you've got something that was your gift, your thing. But to be a genuine leader in the world, we have to let go of knowing everything and instead be the wise people who can take all the dots together and make sense of it all.
And what you just talked about right there is why the customer experience is so important. And I work in contact centers and customer care, is you see and have visibility into that customer journey. And
oh my God, totally.
Make that, what you just talked about, so darn real and something that can be acted upon. That's why they
absolutely
in other parts of the business.
Oh, I mean, I love Zappos for this. This is one of the things that, what they actually sell is quite boring, but the way they've managed to develop a customer service experience, which is so branded and so flavorful, it's almost totally disconnected, almost, but not, to the products, the widgets they actually sell. And one of my so I used to run a lot of market research programs to do innovation with. You need to find out what your customers want before you're going to create new stuff. And the last few years, I've just been saying to people, look, guys, you have a customer service program, right? You have people in call centers. If you develop these people to be not just, push the customer away and try and get rid of them off the phone and give the customer 12 different options before they get to speak to anyone, and hopefully they'll go away. But if instead you go, the source of the most valuable insight into the future of our industry is on the phones or the chatbots, whatever, and work out a way of triaging the rubbish that you don't want to deal with, but finding those gems which show you where the market's going. You don't need to do market research because you've already got it happening every day. Then you've also got the option to also serve those people. So in fact, this happened this week. I was on the call multiple times to a large technology company, let's call it that. We bought a product, high expensive product, and it just didn't work compared to what it's sold as. And therefore we were using it as a product worth a third of its market value. We're just turning the thing on. All the programs and everything no longer weren't using. So I've already spoken to them a couple of times, and they have a process, send an engineer. I was like, the engineer's not going to solve it. It's not an engineering problem. It's a design problem, right? The engineer can't solve a problem that's in the design. Your sensors don't work, right? It's fine, but then don't sell your program, your product as a sensor-based, automatic, everything. Ended up working out what the CEO of the UK's, of this company's UK operations, emailed him and said, listen, I hope you appreciate that I'm giving you some market insight here. That this just doesn't work. I'm a fairly sophisticated user. I'm probably ahead of most curves. This doesn't work. And to their credit, they did get back to me within 5 minutes. The CEO did. But yeah, I think people are missing. If you're companies moving more and more algorithmic, more and more AI-based, chatbot-based, technically alienated from your customers, then you need to also balance that with more touch points with your customers, more connection. And you can do that through advertising, market research. But I really believe customer service centers are where most of us connect most with brands these days.
And even when you say that, I mean, so I worked for an organization that measured the customer experience for 15 years. Unfortunately, and this is part of what you have in the book, is that we rely on our intuition. We rely on experiences that we've had with others. We rely on how we want the experience to be, but don't actually take a look at the data that's sitting right there in front of us.
Right.
And for organizations today, if they don't do that, extinction is going to be coming much faster than it was even just.
Absolutely. Well, these days we can change companies so quickly. We're not locked in to companies anymore. We're much more empowered. In fact, this is what got me starting my first business, is I read a manifesto online in 1999. And it said, the internet is making our customers smarter, faster than we are. That was it. It was a one line of the whole thing. I was like, hold on a minute. And it kind of like little fireworks went off in me, which is, if you're a company that has an HQ and it's all somewhere, no one knows where it is. But what you do to get to be liked is you create an advert, commercial, in 60-second commercial. And it's nothing to do with your company. It's nothing to do with what you really like. But you portray this brand. Everyone goes, oh, great. But these days, we can go online and we can see employees talking about the company, what it's like to work with them, right? Real stuff. You've got Google things. You've got Trustpilot telling you that, you've got all this actual lived experience of the company. The company can't hide anymore. And that's why the customer experience is happening really in every part of your business. There's customer experience going on, right? And I take that, we're a very small company. We're only a few people. But I like to make sure that everything right down to the invoice that you get at the end of a program has got our vibe in it, has got our attention to detail, has got our brandness, so that you go, that was really, oh, ouch, it was more expensive than I thought. But hey, these guys are really thoughtful and human and helpful.
Well, and as you're saying that, I start thinking about, if I within an organization, that if I am not getting insight or fed that type of information from within my organization, in order for me to be a more effective leader, I have to seek that myself. And what I want to do is I'm going through, and I can also say too, for me, you have one of the best speaker packets that was provided to me on the show, and I've had 300 plus episodes, one of the best ones. And there were so many things that I wanted to talk about that I was like, oh my gosh, I don't know where we're going to go with all this. And what I picked out some questions that you, and I want to run through those, and I want you to say, okay, this is the one that we probably would need to talk about.
Great.
Where we've been going with this. Okay. So here I'm going to run through these real quick. Okay. So it's, the pandemic is more of a game changer for businesses than many think. And what issues do you think leaders need to engage with in order to adapt faster to this new normal? Okay, here's the next one. What is the triple threat that every leader and organization must engage with? And why is it an unprecedented opportunity also? Why do you believe that the technology industry as a whole is currently letting humanity down? What role do you think technology can and should play in the future? And what does this mean for how technologies, VCs, and others in the tech ecosystem have to change behavior? Why do we tend to avoid failure? What is the impact? And how do we embrace failure for what you call triple loop learning, and do this through what you call smart experimentation? Why say that every person has 4 types of guidance within to make good decisions? What are they, and how do we identify each within? What kind of leaders will thrive in the world filled with super smart AIs and robots? Will machines replace us? Why do we believe that machines will never be creative and that there will never be artificial wisdom? What is a mismatch moment and a fitting moment? Why is this such a useful distinction for understanding what is working and what is not? What do we need to talk about next, Nick?
Well, I could definitely do the first two, I think, quite quickly, and they're kind of the same question. So I'm going to start with them, and let's just roll through and see where we get to. And you tell me, stop me if I'm going off on a tangent, or don't, if you like the tangent. So the first thing I think is really interesting, because we're all in some various journey of the pandemic, right? There's something going on, and depending on when you're listening to this, you might be out of the pandemic, but the pandemic is probably going to go on longer than we think, first of all. The variant from Brazil seems to be a bit of a game changer. We're still early doors on that. But what I think is interesting is most of us are in the mindset where we're just waiting for it to come back. Normal life, boom, straight back to how it was. And I think what we're actually on is a transformation curve, where we'll never go back to how it was immediately, and probably never will. So, for example, commercial real estate is probably going to have a long-term challenge to deal with itself, right? What's it going to do? Okay. Digital companies are probably not going to suddenly stop getting customers because people have gone, actually, this is quite convenient. Why do I want to go to the store when I can get this brought to my house? Excellent. So the pandemic is a massive game changer. I think it's going to take months and years before we even begin to comprehend what it's done. It's also brought the sort of climate change sustainability thing fully into the primary state of the world. It was getting there, but I think it's accelerated that, which is the realization that essentially there is no business without a nature that works. There is no economy without an ecology. You can't have customers if those customers can't eat, breathe, live for beyond some years. If they're killing themselves, take suicide or whatever, you've got no customers, right? So that's the first thing. I think the pandemic is a game changer. And our natural tendency in what I call control mode is to try and hope it just gets back. I do it myself. I'm like, I can't wait to get back to flying around the world doing keynotes again. I just want to get out of the house. I'm so bored. Take me somewhere, world.
Nick, because I think this perspectives are pretty, unfortunately, distorted on this. So let's go back to 1918.
Yeah.
Spanish flu. Now, it is estimated that 50 million people died worldwide from the Spanish flu. In the United States, it was, 600, 700,000 people that they estimated back then. Our population numbers weren't anywhere near what they are now. So that was like a third of the population of the world was wiped out from that. Now, this has had significantly less impact, and that doesn't mean to minimize the pain and suffering that those have had. However, I think it's really important for us to realize that was 100 years ago. And then we've also had Ebola, we've had H1N1, and these things are starting to stack up on us. This is just the beginning.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. We're in this isn't even the pandemic we're going to talk about, I think. Like in 2050, when they're doing a history of the first part of the century, there was that little thing, and then there was this other thing. And I mean by that something like drug-resistant bacteria. I mean, that for me is a way bigger worry from a systems point of view than this particular virus, which I think is interesting in itself. But yes, totally agree. And partly also because we see social media, we see so much more news. We see things that we just wouldn't have seen in 2018. 1918. And also, it was hidden away by the war. People just didn't know. It was just a different consciousness. Whereas now, when some third contact to you on Facebook's mother died of COVID, right? So you're like, wow, this is really taking people out. And we wouldn't have done that before. But yeah, I agree. And but that rolls into my belief that the pandemic, and this is all crises actually, not this particular one. There's lots of crises out there at the moment. They don't usually create anything new. They accelerate, and this is my transformation words, they accelerate what's breaking down, which is no longer as valuable, and accelerate what's breaking through. So super example of that is I could tell as an innovation and leadership person that going to a retail store in an out-of-town park was becoming less valuable to a lot of people, particularly if you're a younger generation. I don't want to drive. I don't even have a car because I want to be eco-conscious. I don't want to drive somewhere and then do like all my shopping with all these other people. Who wants to do that, right? That was already breaking down. And if you're Walmart, you knew that, right? You look at the figures, you're like, we've got to do something. What are we going to do? I don't know. And then what's breaking through is, I want stuff delivered to me. I want streaming services. So the pandemic is accelerating what I call this triple threat that you mentioned, which I use 3 Ds to help myself and hopefully others make sense of the complexity. So the first one is easy. It's digital. So anything that is not digital yet will become digitalized in some way, not all of it, but some way. And so you really, if you're listening to this, you should be paying attention to AI. You should be paying attention to blockchain. Those two are really massively game changers, and we're going to see that coming out in the next 10 years, 15 years. So that's the first D. The second D is also more obvious. I'll call it the damaged world. So environmental problems, climate change, fires in California, pollution kills 1 million people a year in the US, apparently. So, we're talking, not in the US, sorry, in China. So we're talking about the damaged world. We all have to pay more attention to the fact that our businesses, our organizations rely on healthy human beings and healthy environments, healthy food, right? And the food system breaks down, it changes, it's a game changer. So that's the second D. But the third D I find, I guess, more fascinating in some ways than the other two, which is the disrupted world. And what I mean by this is changes in customers. And so I'll give you a little example from the annals of my actual lived experience with a company I've been working with. And when I first worked with them, they said, look, we've got our expenses and entertainment policy is 47 pages long. I'm like, so you expect a 23-year-old to join your company, read, digest, process, and action 47 pages, right? That is not a customer experience that you've designed well. And I get why it kind of evolved over time, and then they added a few things and something happened and someone slept with someone, so they added another page. I get the whole reason why these things happen like this, but it's not. And I went back a year later, they were like, we've taken some of your advice and now it's 17 pages. And I was like, great job, guys. I mean, it is, they cut half of it out. But for example, if you're in banking and you expect your customers to come to a branch to sign something, and then you pick up one of these new banking apps, they take a picture of your driving license, and then they've given you an account literally 20 seconds later. That's a customer experience that fits a generation that does not want to have to go to a bank and schedule a call, whereas my mum might prefer to schedule a call. So this disruptive world is actually probably more important than, in some ways, than either of the other two Ds, is that we have this massive difference between a 65-year-old and what they want, and a 22-year-old, 18-year-old, a 17-year-old they want. And somehow we have to try and design our experiences to fit probably multiple segments. And that's back to that topic again around how do you stay authentic to your business, your brand, your leadership flavor, but how do you bend to serve others in the moment of that type? So those are the 3 Ds. And I reckon I'll pick one more because I'm going to talk about failure, because I think this is something that is a really challenge. And in fact, in some ways, the more senior the leaders I work with, the more it becomes a problem, actually. I think the younger generations are more open to the idea that failure isn't a failure. It's a learning in disguise, which is, it's an easy adage to say. But we have been trained not to fail. I'll give you another example. I did a whole program for a very large company, and one of the strands was about failure, that we can't innovate because everyone's so scared of failing. So I was like, okay, so we created a whole set of tools around smart experimentation about how you can help people make little mistakes that are a couple $100, but they test one thing, and then they test an idea, and then you do another one. And then the word came down from on high, the great and the good. Love the pack, love the training, love the module, love the tools, love everything, but we can't use the word failure because we don't want people to think they can fail. I'm like, okay, we're just on a year on this. So that gives you, that shows you that people can even be conscious that they know that their company is being stifled by a fear of failure. And you try and solve it, but then no one wants the word failure on the label because we don't want people failing. It's like, okay, it makes no sense. So one of the things that I like to look at with leaders, particularly senior leaders, is what we call triple loop learning. And this is actually, double loop learning is a thing out there in the management world. And I've added a third loop, if you like. So the first loop is, I've done a project, it doesn't matter what it is, written a proposal, written a plan, written a budget, whatever. Done a project, I've done something. It didn't work quite the way I wanted it to work. What can I learn from that for next time? So that's the first loop of the learning cycle. The second loop is, what does this failure tell me about this particular product and service as a whole? Maybe the failure is not about the way I executed the project. Maybe the failure is actually that the world's moving on and this product is no longer quite as good as it used to be. We need to think about this. And then the third triple loop of the loops is, what does this failure on this project tell me, not just about my own company's products and services, but about my industry and the way my industry isn't or isn't working? So for example, you could say General Motors 10 years ago, the number of cars being driven went down quite considerably amongst young people. So that's the first loop is, we maybe need to do some new, better marketing for young people about our cars. Well, the second loop was, young people as a whole aren't buying as many cars and their driving licenses are getting them later and they're not buying as much fuel. And then the third loop would be, maybe our industry shouldn't be selling so many gas guzzling cars, because as a whole, we are learning that we can't chuck all this carbon out. And famously this week, GM has announced it won't sell any more gasoline-driven power cars, which is pretty amazing, right? That's the triple loop.
Well, and it was quickly followed by Ford Motor Company stating the same thing.
Did it? Oh, I didn't see that. Haven't seen that yet. So it's happening. It's a live systemic change occurring.
Most definitely. Well, when we start talking about all this, ultimately, human beings have to engineer all of this, right?
Absolutely.
That's really what the book is all about. Is how do you the change?
And maybe we're just in the end here. Well, I'll just bring in that bit you asked about technology and AI. So I fundamentally believe that technology, the way it's driven, it's algorithmic. Is in we create a rule, an algorithm, a piece of code that says if this, then this. Ultimately, all computers ultimately have a rule book that says if this, then this. And AI develops that rule book for itself rather than gets given one. That's kind of a super simplified version, but it's always about rules. Whereas human beings, when we are in what I call create mode, not control mode, create mode, we're not rule-based. We actually break rules. We disrupt markets. And back to that bio you read about me realizing that when we went from old mechanistic physics to quantum physics, we broke fundamental rules in our head that we thought were the only rules, the answer to all life, Newton's laws, right? And so that's why I believe that human beings have a creative potential that machines won't ever have. It's because machines look to create rules, and we can, and when we're in our disruptive best, we can look to go, what if we broke this rule? What would happen? And would it be good? And that's something that a machine can't tell you. You have to think through it and go through the journey yourself as an innovator.
Well, Nick Jankel, gosh, I've really enjoyed this, and I'm going to continue to go through the book, and we might have you back on, and I'm sure on again, because there's a couple things that we didn't get to that I absolutely want to. But I want to say that the Fast Leader Legion wishes you the very best in all your work.
Now, before we move on, let's get a quick word from our sponsor. An Even Better Place to Work is an easy-to-use solution that gives you a continuous diagnostic on employee engagement along with integrated activities that will improve employee engagement and leadership skills in everyone. Using this award-winning solution is guaranteed to create motivated, productive, and loyal employees who have great work relationships with their colleagues and your customers. To learn more about An Even Better Place to Work, visit beyondmorale.com/better.
Okay, Fast Leader Legion, it's time for the
Hump Day Hoedown.
Okay, Nick, the Hump Day Hoedown is a part of our show where you give us good insights fast. So I'm going to ask you several questions, and your job is to give us robust yet rapid responses that are going to help us move onward and upward faster. Nick Jankel, are you ready to hoe down?
I'm ready to hoe down.
Right. So what is holding you back from being an even better leader today?
Remembering how bold I can be. Not remembering how bold I can be.
What is the best leadership advice you have ever received?
You are only as successful as your collaborations.
And what is one secret that you believe contributes to your success in business or in life?
Doing the work on myself to break my own patterns.
And what would be one book you'd recommend to our Legion? And it can be from any genre.
I'm going to say The Tao Te Ching maybe by Lao Tzu, by someone. We don't know who he was. The Tao Te Ching, incredible book on leadership advice.
Okay, Fast Leader Legion, you can find links to that and other bonus material by going to fastleader.net and searching Nick Jankel. And Jankel is Jankel. Okay, Nick, this is my last question.
Yeah.
Imagine you were given the opportunity to go back to the age of 25, and you can take the knowledge and skills that you have now back with you, but you can't take it all. You can only take one. So what particular piece of knowledge would you take back with you, and why?
Good one. Pay more attention to your relationships with your clients than your clever products and services.
Nick, I had a great time with you today. Can you please share with the Fast Leader Legion how they can connect with you?
Best way, website, switchonnow.com. In the footer, you can sign up to my newsletter, and that's where I get most of my content out. And there's some free webinars and content for you if you fancy it.
Nick Jankel, thank you for sharing your knowledge and wisdom, and the Fast Leader Legion honors you, and thanks you for helping us get over the hump.
Thank you for joining me on the Fast Leader Show today. For recaps, links from every show, special offers, and access to download and subscribe, if you haven't already, head on over to fastleader.net so we can help you move onward and upward faster.